As protesters lined up outside, a federal appeals court considered California's constitutional amendment defining marriage as a man and a woman. This is the CitizenLink report. I'm Stuart Shepard, along with our judicial analyst Bruce Hausknecht, who just returned from California, where he got a front row seat at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
I did. Hello, Stuart.
It's good to have you here. Describe for us what it's like to be sitting there as they consider California's marriage amendment. What was the room like?
Well, it was packed, number one. Usually appellate courtrooms are kind of small. They fit maybe 100 spectators, but easily doubled that. And I was sitting right behind counsel's tables with a number of people in folding chairs that were quite uncomfortable, but yet the occasion was quite important, and so it was good to be there.
And to fill out the scene, there are three judges in the front, and as we look at them, basically two that we're concerned about that will probably rule against marriage and one that would rule for.
That's right. The makeup was Stephen Reinhardt, of course, who is a liberals liberal in the Ninth Circuit, and one we have bumped into many times before on family issues. Judge Hawkins, also another liberal, and Judge Smith, who is reputed to be a conservative. That we will see about that.
All right. Well, the attorney defending marriage was Charles Cooper. Here's one of the main arguments that he made.
The key reason that marriage has existed at all in any society and at any time is that sexual relationships between men and women naturally produce children.
Now, Bruce, I have to say, that seems like an extremely obvious point, except perhaps in a room packed with high-powered attorneys.
That's right, Stuart. And this case from the get-go has been derailed by the question of, well, why not give marriage to same-sex couples because they love each other too? So it's been derailed from its focus on children since early on, and at the Ninth Circuit it seemed to suffer from that same problem.
Give us a couple of the key legal arguments that are made in cases like this, explaining why marriage is important to government and to society.
Well, marriage, of course, socially and culturally has been important for thousands of years. Legally and constitutionally, it's important because the state has an interest in making sure that children are raised properly and that they don't become wards of the state.
And define has an interest. What does that mean?
Well, the state, number one, wants good citizens, and two, they don't want to pay for them. And so they encourage people to get married, have kids, and stay together as a family, and that reduces the cost to the state of having to raise a family or deal with the poverty created by the breakup of the family. So that's the state interest in regulating marriage, and only heterosexuals can produce children the natural way. Yeah. And so that's, for thousands of years, why government has had an interest in regulating marriage.
Do the questions from the judges that they hit the attorneys with give any indication of how they might go on this?
Sometimes they do. This particular court was pretty balanced in attacking both attorneys in some of their arguments. So from that respect, I was quite pleased to see that. And in fact, some of these appellate judges can be quite funny at times and break the tension in the courtroom through some of their humor.
Yeah, now on the other side, we had attorneys Ted Olson and David Boies, who were famously opposed against each other in that little presidential tiff that we had a few years back when they were trying to work out the outcome of the election between Bush v. Gore. But now they're working together as a team to try to derail Californians who voted for marriage. What did you think of how they brought their case? I mean, they're famous as attorneys.
Right. And their fame comes, fairly easily because they're good at what they do. They're very good spokesmen behind the lectern, addressing the court, quick on their feet, and answering questions, as Charles Cooper was for our side. And so they obviously have mastered the facts and the art of convincing someone, including appellate judges.
Yeah, give us just a little more sense of how Charles Cooper did then on defending marriage for us.
Well, Cooper was challenged basically to see if he was going to allow Reinhardt especially to find some middle ground in terms of Reinhardt was asking Cooper, for instance, California is a different state than most other states with marriage amendments. They had same-sex marriage for approximately 4 months in 2008.
Forced on it by the state Supreme Court.
Exactly right. And so under an examination under the 14th Amendment of this Proposition 8, does that change things? Obviously, Reinhardt hinting that he wants to find some kind of smaller basis on which to answer this question, maybe binding only California and not the entire country.
And he said so pretty much in so many words that he was looking for a way to come up with a ruling that wouldn't change marriage law for the whole Ninth Circuit, the whole country for that matter.
Right, and I think he's doing that with an eye toward the Supreme Court, because he's been reversed so many times by the Supreme Court that he perhaps has gotten cagier in his old age.
What else did you observe about Stephen Reinhardt? We had talked, just to give you an idea, for weeks before we heard this selection. Anytime a major social issue comes up at the Ninth Circuit, which tends to be the most liberal of the circuit courts, he always seems to be on the panel. And it's randomly selected, they say. It's just pure chance that he ends up on these. So we laughed when we heard that he was indeed on this panel. Now that you've seen him in person, what are your observations?
Well, I guess the court persona is different from the judge that writes the opinions, because in court he's very fair, very equal in his treatment of counsel for both sides.
Yeah, and funny, as you mentioned.
And funny, and asks probing questions of all the attorneys. But that's a different judge than the one we see in his judicial opinions over the years in socially conservative issue cases.
All right. Now, this session was in two parts. The first hour, which went long, as opposed to was about standing. The question of whether these are the right people to bring the case at all to defend marriage. The issue here is whether the state alone could bring a defense of marriage under the California law, or whether the folks who brought and put the Prop 8, as it's called, on the ballot and saw it through to being placed in the Constitution are the right people. Do the people defend, or does the state defend? And they spent more than an hour battling that out.
This is a key issue, because in California, as in other states, the initiative process whereby the people bring an issue, vote on it, and put it into law, it bypasses the legislature, it bypasses the attorney general, it bypasses the governor. They have no say in it. But suddenly, because they choose not to defend it in court, they effectively have vetoed
they being the
it.
state, the governor, and the attorney general are not defending it.
Yes, and by failing to defend, they are in effect exercising a veto that they didn't have in the first place. And even Reinhardt was pointing that out, and I think he was quite disturbed by it.
Here's the way David Boies argued it from the other side.
They don't have standing unless they have a personal, concrete, and particularized injury.
Now, that's a fairly legal statement, but what does he mean, really? What's he trying to say?
Right. It's a constitutional requirement that makes sure that the courts are not burdened by parties who aren't really hurting. They just want something declared unconstitutional, or they want something defended, and they don't have a dog in that fight, so to speak. So basically what Boies and Olson are arguing is that Protect Marriage is just a proponent of the initiative. They're not a state entity, they're not a government official, they're not charged with protecting the citizens of California.
But it would seem like a logical argument that they represent the people who voted this into the Constitution, and therefore the people have a place to speak out.
And that's the argument on our side, that Proposition 8, the proponents, Protect Marriage, stands in the shoes of those people, those 7 million Californians who voted for marriage. And since no one else will defend it, they are the perfect party to represent them.
And the key here is that question of standing, of whether these are the right people bringing the case. This could take a real detour if the court says, no, you're not.
Yes, it seemed like Judge Reinhardt was hinting that the Ninth Circuit might detour this case for a time and ask the California Supreme Court for an opinion on standing under California law. If that happens, they'll ask a question and the Supreme Court will answer it. It'll come back to the Ninth Circuit, and then the Ninth Circuit will then take that response from the Supreme Court and decide on whether they're standing, and then decide on whether there's a constitutional claim against Prop 8 or not.
All right. So as you look at the entirety of the day and all 2.5 hours or so that are ran, what was your takeaway? How do you feel about it?
Well, I feel that it's an uphill battle in the Ninth Circuit anytime you go there, and especially with the 3 judges that we drew. So I'm not overly optimistic. But we've known all along that this case is going to be decided, if at all, by the Supreme Court.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce. Appreciate your insights. Appreciate the fact that you got to go. I'm happy you got to be there. It's got to be exciting to sit in the courtroom like that. We also appreciate hearing from you and the questions and comments that you send our way. You may always write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Meantime, remember, stand tall and be heard.